Scott Strickland. This is my wife, Janna Strickland. And we have 3 beautiful children, Violet, Ava, and Judah.
That's enough introduction.
Yeah.
So, my journey to Orthodoxy. So I grew up in Bryant, which is a little suburban town outside of Little Rock. And my dad was the pastor of the biggest church in town, big Southern Baptist church in town. So, small town, the big church in town, and he was active in local politics and on the school board and all these things. So I was definitely used to feeling like I kind of had a microscope on me as a kid, which was hard because I'm awkward. So when I was 5, and I know there's a lot of other converts, right? So typical Baptist service ends with, they call it the altar call, right? So if you today want to pray to receive Jesus in your heart, log down, let us pray with you. So when I was 5 years old, my daddy up there preaching, I ran down the aisle, and I guess that was kind of my first desire to follow God. I guess that he's like, if you want Jesus in your life, I'm like, yes, I'm coming. So I got baptized after that. That night, my dad prayed with me. It was so sweet. I still remember when I was 5. So got baptized after that in the Baptist tradition. And my dad, growing up, my dad was probably the biggest influence on my faith in general. He's a really open-minded and intelligent person. So I tell a lot of people, I was a Southern Baptist preacher's kid, and now I'm in the Orthodox Church, and, people worry for me, but he's not like that, I guess. I don't know. He's not a judgmental person. He's not real harsh. I don't know. And the way he treated other people, I think, was one of the biggest things that made his faith real to me as a kid, because he really truly cared about everyone around him, and not in a self-righteous, I want to save you all from burning flames kind of attitude. Yeah, he just really cared about people. So we had a lot of big, good talks, about faith. And so as I look back, I realized he was probably the biggest influence on my faith growing up. So when I was around 13-ish, I don't remember exactly, somewhere around there, went to church camp. It had a really, I don't know how to describe it, one of those profound spiritual experiences, and came to the conclusion, I guess, as a 13-year-old, that I really do want to have faith in my life. I really do want to follow Jesus. I guess that's starting to fall in love with Jesus in a more mature way. And so then, again, following the Baptist tradition, where they practice believer's baptism, right? So they believe you should only get baptized when you are fully conscious of your decision that you're making to follow God, right? So I had this profound experience and was like, well, I need to get baptized again, right? Because, did I really know what I was doing when I was 5 years old? And of course now I look back on that a lot differently. But I think getting rebaptized and that whole experience was kind of the beginning of my mind transforming as far as how I saw salvation, and realizing this seems much more like this lifelong process and not this one-time event. You know what I mean? So that definitely had an influence later on, obviously. Yeah, typical teenager, really. I don't know. I was a really good kid till I left home. And, there was just a lot of pretty typical rebellion, especially, I grew up really sheltered and, very, very religious home and all that. So, but I also, part of the rebellion and self-medicating and partying and all that, I really, really struggled with depression so hard, so bad. I don't know how to describe it. And looking back now, I know a lot of that was filling the void, I guess, it got so bad. I actually was hospitalized briefly for depression. I had like an anxiety attack kind of situation, and then you kind of cry for help, and then you get put on all sorts of fun medications and all that, which I am now off of a few years later. That was a long journey, yeah. But I think part of the rebellion was also, typical testing your limits as a young person. I think that's pretty normal stuff. But also, I think the faith I grew up in, feeling so rules oriented and being good, and I think I would just really wanted to test the waters to see, does sin really affect my soul? Does this really change? Like, I can have faith and still do these things that other people do, right? Does that make sense? Well, I tried to join a Christian organization during my very brief college career, and was, I guess, kind of the bad girl, and had a lot of rumors spread around that Christian club about me and stuff, and so got really burned by Christians altogether. But I still, I think through all that, I always felt like these people don't represent Jesus, and like, this is not the Jesus. I knew that this was not the Jesus that I loved, this character that I was seeing in these people. So, so I met Scott it was our sophomore year, I guess, right? At UALR.
Yeah.
Met Scott our sophomore year of college. I had dropped out for a semester and come back, and we had 2 classes together, and we instantly became super close friends. Instantly. And wasn't in church at that time, and didn't really know how I felt about like organized religion in general and all these things. Typical 19-year-old. Janna's childhood.
Yeah, Janna's childhood, Scott's childhood. So I didn't grow up in church. My parents grew up Baptist, kind of that small country Baptist church thing. And definitely grew up in a household with like super strong morality. Fairness was always like, a big thing in our house. But they, even though my parents grew up Baptist, they didn't really take it into adulthood. It was just kind of, I think it was also kind of a generational thing with, my dad kind of always identified with kind of that post-60s revolution kind of, I guess, mindset. And so, I think part of that is like, how do you kind of have that, and also, kind of that Baptist tradition you're raised in, and dealing with that. But my mom always had kind of a private faith, but we didn't really see it that often as far as like coming out kind of in our daily lives. I definitely would have talks kind of growing up with my dad about like the universe and like space and aliens and like God, basically kind of just those big things of like, man, like is there a God? Like, does God exist? And so I think for all of us, and for definitely for me, it was more of that like kind of that distant God who like set the universe into motion. but then like kind of like stepped back. That, you know, that was kind of, I guess kind of my overall view kind of growing up. But yeah, I mean, you know, having Christmases and not, it's funny to talk about, especially after getting married, that, you know, her Christmases were like a very specific kind of way, and our Christmases were like, you know, gifts, and, you know, it was just there's just a different focus there for sure. And Easter, yeah, of course, yeah, definitely a different focus. And so, you know, growing up, you know, definitely had, you know, interactions with Christians, but we had a pastor's family that lived next door that were, they, you know, they were sweet, they were really nice, but, you know, they would give me like literature, or like one time they gave me like a little like God at Work pen, and just, I don't know, it always, from other Christians, it always felt kind of like judgment, I guess, kind of like, oh, I'm the, you know, the weird kid or whatever, and so it felt like judgment, and I'm sure part of that was on my part as well, but and then growing up kind of through the teenage years, definitely was kind of rebelling against something, I guess. Like I was a good kid, and like I really didn't break any rules, or you know, I really wasn't a wild kid, but there was still that like rebellion of like, you know, music and art, and you know, I got my first tattoo at like 18. I was there like when my sister got tattooed for the first time, like holding her hand. So I really, what's that? Yeah, and like punk rock and metal, and I think a lot of that was really kind of seeing some of the you know, bad things or tragedies in the world, and like trying to come to grips, I guess, with that suffering. And so I think for me, like, you know, whether that was like metal music or, you know, punk rock or art, was like, there was kind of a release there of like going like, okay, this stuff exists, or suffering does exist. And I don't know, I think that was kind of my way to kind of work through a lot of that. But then, yeah, so fast forward a little bit to graduating high school. I'm 18 years old. I have the choice between going to Cancun, Mexico, or I can take a trip with my parents. And so I was a good kid. So I was like, Mom and Dad, you know, let's go to Europe, and they, you know, they were pumped about it, and so had the crazy opportunity to go to Italy, and we got this, you know, kind of a you know, cheap trip, really quick deal. I think it was a week long altogether. But you know, seeing the sights, whatever, and at this point I was kind of just not spiritual at all, kind of ambivalent, I guess. And so we're doing the trip, we're going around, and then finally we get to Assisi. And I had, you know, at the time, like, I didn't know who St. Francis was. I you know, even if you told me, I might not have cared. I was honestly there for the art. It was an art experience for me. And history, you know, loved history, loved art. But spirituality just really wasn't a part of that. And so, yeah, so finally, you know, we're on this trip, we get to Assisi, it's beautiful, it's the most beautiful place we've been on the trip. And finally break away from my parents. I'm like, all right, let's go on this trip. Let's, like, leave me alone, I'm doing my own thing. And so I'm walking around, and sure enough, there's like this little door, you know, and I didn't even realize there were monasteries or what was in this town. And so see this old door, open it up, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna explore. Go down these stairs, and all of a sudden I'm in this like pitch black dark room. There's like a golden, you know, coffin, sarcophagus, like in the center of the room. There's like candles going. There's like a couple of like pews, and like I'm the only one down there, and I look to my right, and there's this like hooded, I guess Franciscan, I don't know, this hooded monk, long hair, beard, his eyes are closed. And so I kind of go down there, and I felt really kind kind of awkward, honestly, because I didn't want to interrupt, but I kind of circled the room, and for me, that was honestly my first experience with kind of, I guess the divine on earth. So kind of, I guess seeing his connection, like with God, or just, I guess that moment really, kind of going around the room, and there was a preserved body, I guess a saint, I'm not sure, in the middle of the room, he's over there praying. So it was really powerful. And then the rest of the trip, it kind of opened up my eyes a little bit to that world, and so that was kind of a big touchstone for me. And then come back, start college, read the Tao Te Ching in lit class, moved on to kind of Indian literature, definitely in this seeking mode of like, man, what does it all mean? I worked at Hastings at the time, so buying books was really easy. I was just buying all kinds of stuff. And then coinciding with that, my relationship with my girlfriend was like falling apart. My parents were getting a divorce at the time, and my sister had left for around that same time. My sister had left for Okinawa with her husband for years, because he was in the Air Force. And so that kind of created that perfect storm of where like I started going on long walks and was like, man, like either God exists or life is pain and meaningless, and like, so really kind of like waffling back and forth, like, and honestly, like in hindsight, kind of praying, like looking up at the moon and being like, man, God, like if you're there, like help me, like, what is this all about? And so kind of going through college, really searching, met my first non-weird Christian friend in the art program, my buddy Matt Page. Met him, he's a great Lutheran guy, he was listening to rock and Queens of the Stone Age and whatever. So we could kind of vibe on certain things, and he was just a great guy. And he was like, hey man, he was like, why don't you come to church with me sometime? And I was like, I don't know. And so eventually I did. I don't know if it was after we got married or when.
We went together though.
Yeah, we went together and kind of visited. But yeah, he was just a really nice, caring guy. So kind of, did that, and then kind of picking up. I guess we met, and then.
Well, that's kind of true.
Yeah.
So like I said, we instantly were the best of friends and wanted to be together all the time, still. But it started to get really serious, and at first I like really pushed away because I was scared, and anyway. But we finally were kind of more together, and it's getting more serious. But I, even in my like I'm not going to church kind of rebelling type phase, I still, I wanted this to lead to marriage, and I believed that it was. But I was like, this is not going to work if we don't have some sort of common ground, about faith and spirituality, and all this. Like, I'm not going to raise a family with someone who doesn't believe the same thing as me, and and these things. So
yeah, it's like even though you were kind of rebelling, you still deep down you had that.
I was just gonna get it together later.
Yeah.
I was just having fun, But I got down on my knees in my dorm room, and started prayed a long time. And basically, I thought of myself as, the story of Gideon and laying out the fleece, and I can't even remember. Just honest to goodness, I can't really remember the story. But I basically, in my mind, I was like, I'm Gideon laying out my fleece. And basically was like, this seems perfect. This seems like who I should be with. but I know that it's not going to work if he doesn't come to know you. Show me whether or not I'm supposed to be with this person by showing up in his life. And like 2 weeks later, I think it was close to Easter, but it was like a couple of weeks later, he was like, okay, I'm going to come to church with you. Because I was still, I forgot, I was still periodically going to my dad's church. He was still a pastor at that point. He's not anymore, long story. And then I still went sometimes. And we were going to go because it was Easter. That's what it was. Let's go because it was Easter. And then you came, and
I visited and was kind of like, oh, okay, like, this is not,
sorry, I'm backtracking. I'd given him a Bible too, and he had started reading like the New Testament and stuff.
Yeah.
And then remember, you were like, I noticed all the really good parts are in
red. True story. I was like, that is the best stuff. Like,
I'm like, yeah, Jesus.
And so in the beginning, like, I visited church, and it's a Southern Baptist church, but pretty.
It's very contemporary.
Contemporary though, more contemporary. And so for me in the beginning, I was kind of like, all right, like, I was seeking, but I was kind of like, the Christian faith had been right in front of me, my entire life, and so I was like, this is not it. And honestly, what I saw from a lot of people, it sounds mean, but like just more of that judgmental side of like, I never had, it was always about like numbers or whatever, like here's a tract, or like here's like, do you know where you're going when you die, and all this, So I went to church a couple of times, but honestly, what did it for me was reading the gospel, like really, because I had this idea of who Christ was, but when you pick up the New Testament, you're like, man, this guy, like he's a rebel, it was super powerful for me, and so that I kind of got hooked on just reading through the gospel, read through like Romans, and just really started going through it, and met Troy, who was part of the, I guess, college group, and he's kind of the classic like cool like college guy with the shaved head, Jesse. So just super cool, like super bubbly, and could kind of identify with him a lot, and I grilled him, he kind of grilled me back, and it was really a time of learning in the college age group, and we were in the same kind of group together. Her dad was like the pastor. Her dad was the pastor of this church. So it was interesting kind of dynamics or whatever. But I was baptized traditional Baptist way. You wear the white gown. They dunk you in, and you try not to fall down as you get back up out of the baptistry. It weighs like 100 pounds soaking wet. You're like, oh, I gotta get out of here. But it was beautiful. My mom was there, so my mom has always been kind of supportive. My dad's always been a little bit more like ambivalent, kind of like just doesn't really. I don't know if it's guilt or what, but he kind of just wants to stay away from it. And so we get married. I'm like all on fire, for God, and we're pumped, and things are great. And then we get married, and we stop going to church.
My dad quit preaching at the church he'd been at almost my entire childhood, which is really rare. For a preacher's kid to be in the same church almost her whole life. But he quit being a pastor and ran for Secretary of State of Arkansas. And that was interesting and intense. He lost. With Asa, he ran with Asa Hutchinson.
It was after the Bush years, like no one could have won. The tide had like...
The incumbent's name was Charlie Daniels, and really, I think that was a lot of it.
Yeah.
But it really was. I don't know if y'all remember Charlie Nichols.
Stopped going to church. We were kind of in this we got married when we were 20. So we were 20 years old. We were like still kind of partying and like being immature.
I didn't want a whole lot to do with it because I was like escaping.
It's funny because like I was trying to move towards church. She was still kind of trying to like run away from church a little bit. So we were kind of in two different places. And so
I think you kind of followed me. Like I wasn't a good example.
Well, at this time, like I was still kind of a baby Christian, and I just didn't know up and down. And so stopped going to church for a while. And then we were like, you know what? We need to, start going to church again.
The community.
Yeah, the community aspect. And so started going to a church called the Summit Church. Great church. Kind of, I guess, a modern Baptist church.
Yeah. It's that more mega church kind of deal.
A little bit. So we went there. The worship kind of, at least drew me in, kind of drew us in. More of that kind of,
guitar solo.
Flashy. You know what? Hey, the thing is like, it's easy to dog on that now, but I mean, we kind of needed it at the time. At least I did, as far as like needing something.
Brought us back to church.
You need something to be like, oh, church is relevant, and then it kind of draws you back in. So got drawn back in, and things were great for probably a couple of years. But then like we read.
I think we started to grow.
We grew.
And change and started to see things that. I don't know. We weren't comfortable with the showy worship service anymore, and
that
seemed real meaningless and silly.
It got distracting, and it was kind of like
that's a better word.
You kind of realize like there's something isn't right. I guess you feel,
Oh, and then they were going to build the coffee shop and the indoor playground and all the. They started intensely raising money for all the mega church type stuff and. It
was kind of a perfect storm.
We got letters asking for money from them.
After we left. So
you're like, dude, do you know that we left?
So that was happening. We read a book called The Irresistible Revolution. I don't know if anybody else has read that, but it's kind of more focused on like, Christianity and war, or like the Iraq war, or whatever. And so started asking questions, and at the time at least, the Baptist Church like openly supported the Iraq war. So like for us, it was kind of that question of like, okay, like should a church like endorse a war? What does that mean? Like I don't know, just really struggling with like, and I was reading books on like,
is there just war?
Is there just war theory? Like, should Christians engage in war? And that really became a question of like, Christian nonviolence and all these different things, and trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and kind of the conservative right having kind of a stronghold on the evangelical, like, heaven forbid that you don't vote conservatively and all those, anyway.
Yeah, and I've kind of been a moderate we've, I guess, kind of been, independent or whatever, but, so we kind of went through that, and then ended up leaving because we felt like, hey, we've got something isn't right, or...
Well, we quit going to church for quite a while, but I still look back on it as one of the biggest periods of spiritual growth in our life. Because we quit going to church, but we were, reading constantly. We were learning a lot and growing a lot in our spiritual walk or whatever. But then, so the time came where we're like, okay, we got to find a church again. Where do we go?
And then I found out through a painting professor in college about this church called Christ Church, which kind of had a model that's like, Christ Church is like a non-denominational church. In a sense, a little bit of that like post-Baptist, like people that were Baptists that were kind of like, this doesn't really fit where I am, or had questions or what have you, and then went non-denominational. Churches.
Well, it was very like home. It started as a home church.
Started as a home
They were
church.
supposed to try to be doing the first century thing. Right?
Trying to do like the first century church. You know, their big thing was like Acts 2:42. What is it? Breaking of bread, prayer.
Communion every Sunday is not common in the evangelical world.
Yeah, so there was communion every
deal.
Sunday. You know, I mean, it was, you know, very different from Orthodox Church, but still, it was there, and just really grew a lot there as far as.
It was a wonderful family. It was a wonderful church.
Yeah, yeah. Really
And the pastor was wonderful and did some good marriage counseling that we needed, and that was a really good time in our life.
Yeah. So really, fast forward, I guess, to we were moving up here, and we're like, oh, we'll just find another church, non-denominational church, kind of like Christ Church, and we'll go up there, and it'll be fine, and it'll be great. You know, we're definitely strong spiritually at that time, and wanted to, you know, keep. I mean, I was playing in the worship band at church. You know, we were definitely involved quite a bit, and came up here and kind of visited. I mean, I don't want to name any names, but visited 5 or 6 different churches, and they either it may have been less, but we visited like very you know, more conservative churches that were more of that like kind of rock show thing that we had been to before, that, you know, really we weren't interested in. But, you know, all these churches were, you know, really sweet people, really nice, really welcoming. And then on the flip side of that, there was a couple of churches that were like more like almost like, you know, sin isn't a problem, or like very I don't know, maybe liberal is probably the best word.
Love wins,
you know, more of that Raw Bell kind of thing, and over here there was more of that super conservative kind of thing.
It's like everywhere we visited were like these stereotypes of like what we were not looking for.
You visit a church and the kids would like see some, you know, $100,000 playground or whatever, and they'd be like, we want to go here, you know. I'm like, I'm sure you do. So it
got really discouraging.
We were really sad and really just trying to deal with that. And at the time,
because we're moving we both lived in Central Arkansas our entire life too, so it's a big transition moving to a new place anyway, and then not feeling like you can't find that solid ground or whatever.
So then, you know, I was already primed a little bit in a kind of weird divine way. Like, was reading this book, Celebration of Discipline, and a couple of like early church, like Western fathers. Read a little bit of Augustine, a little bit of Francis, even before coming to the Orthodox Church. Just really seeking. And so a guy I still don't even really know on Facebook. Was posting, yeah, it's one of her friends.
Well, not
he kept posting like early church fathers or like Orthodox pieces, and I was like, oh, this is interesting, but I didn't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
And
but it was always really profound, and it was like, what is this?
Yeah,
I don't know what this is.
It was something we had never heard of.
It's not Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because that nowhere on our radar would we have. Yeah. So I was like, let's find out what that's about, what Brian's doing or whatever.
So then we started doing like, or at least I started doing kind of deep like online research, like what is this? Like who are these people?
Yeah.
All the time.
I think it was a few weeks.
Couple of weeks.
We were both constantly, reading about what is the Orthodox Church,
Yeah.
And then finally I was like, babe, like, we just need to go visit.
Yeah, and I was like, no.
Like, you're like, I don't know. Some of it's weird. I don't know. You know,
because if you get on Orthodox forums, like some of that stuff
that can get intense, and then a lot of the doctrines are really different. A lot of it's a far cry from what we're used to.
Yeah, very.
But I was like, we just need to visit, like,
So sure enough, we show up, and it was the feast of.
I think it was a potluck Sunday, and I think it was after the Blessing of the Waters.
Yeah.
Feast day, maybe. I think because it was we had talked about going around Christmas, and they were like, nah, and so it was like a little bit after Christmas. So I think that's...
Christmas was too intimidating. You're like, I don't know.
But Paula made her amazing rice and lentils dish with the onions on it.
Yeah.
It's so like that.
And then, so
But it was delicious.
Paula made that,
I already like Middle Eastern food.
I remember, Korea and Tom would bring us like blessed bread, like as we started visiting, Tom like picked up Judah that first time we visited. I was like, man, this is amazing. And so
we loved it. It was great.
Yeah. And so then at this point, at least for me, started reading the early Christian writings, Saint Clement of Rome, Polycarp, I can't pronounce it, but the Didache, or however you pronounce that, the 7 Ignatius epistles. And honestly, for me personally, and I think for both of us, it was a time where we started coming here. We weren't members yet, but we had to decide on, is church hierarchy a real thing? What does sola scriptura mean? What about Mary? What about the true presence? Was this indeed the early church? Is this too good to be true? Are we going to find something somewhere where we're like, this is not
flying saucer?
Yeah, I was like, it seemed almost too good to be true. Yeah, because coming from a place where you feel like you're trying to have this first century church model, and then you're like, it's been here, like, it's just, we just didn't know it was here.
And it didn't look like what we thought it would.
It didn't look like what we thought it would at all. So that was kind of the big deal. And so then, for me, it kind of feels like a full circle experience from kind of that experience, in a sissy that I really knew nothing about, kind of coming to the Orthodox Church in an interesting way. And a lot of it appealed to us as far as, I know with your upbringing, kind of the idea of like knowing where the Holy Spirit is, but not where it isn't. Not just like, I don't know, shutting people down, or I don't know, you can probably speak to that a little bit. Kind of embracing the mystery, I guess. And I honestly had a lot of trouble in the beginning because I wanted all of our, so many Protestants are like trying to find like the early church, and like I just wanted to like scream from the rooftops of like, look guys, like, draw like a big X and say like, this is where it is. But it's, I don't know, you can't really do that, I guess, or it doesn't work, I don't know, but just getting so
not everyone's going to come to the same conclusion as you.
Exactly. So getting really excited, and then kind of the winds out of your sails, because you're like, man, all my friends like won't come with me or whatever.
No one cares.
And and then I guess now, it's easy to like demonize, Protestantism or whatever, or be super legalistic, being Orthodox, but I think, not doing that. But I think for me, like the salvation via suffering has really been kind of big in my life, at least. It's hard to get that through your head, but do you need that?
Yeah, well, I was gonna talk about how, so obviously the newness, total, the first time we came to Divine Liturgy, obviously is a completely different world, and so it's intimidating. It's very intimidating.
Yeah.
Father John is so kind and welcoming and wonderful. I know that made a big difference for us.
Mm-hmm.
If you had been intimidating, I might have read it now.
No, seriously. I mean, whether Korea, Maryland, Father John,
Yes.
Tom. I mean, it's
Tom and Kate,
without that, that relational aspect.
Right.
You could easily come in here and be like, whoa, this is.
Right, because we were making jokes, and I was like, this is great. But Father John's joking with me. It's so awesome. But like that first Sunday when I felt intimidated and scared. But So it was really new and foreign, but really like mesmerizing at the same time, and really drew me in. But I really felt like right after, like, I think Scott was really kind of full on pursuing, and I got kind of cold feet and was, like, we got to deal with all these major things that are so different than, you know, what's been drilled in my head my whole life, you know. Like, I'm excited, but, you know, I'm going to have to figure this out. But I read, Father John recommended, you know, Bishop Ware's books, The Orthodox Way and
Orthodox Way and the Orthodox Church.
Yeah, so, and I read the Orthodox Way first, and that was when I fell in love. Like, just the actual theology in the book, I was like, oh my gosh, like all these other things that I don't even care about right now, because this is speaking to me like nothing else ever. And it felt like, so it was that feeling of all these things that made me feel weird, and like maybe I couldn't be I love Jesus, but how can I be a Christian if my conclusions in love of Jesus are drawing me to such different conclusions than these people that say like this is how you should be. And so feeling very out of all those things that made me feel really out of place were there in Orthodox theology, and like brought me home basically. And then the being able to make this historical connection to the early church, and I don't know, I felt like I finally had context for who Jesus is. And that was really huge for me.
Did your daughter help you in your decision too?
Huh?
Did your daughter help you? Did she tell you what her opinion was of the church?
That's a good question. Yeah, they had some hard times, but I'm trying to remember. There's a couple of things Violet said, and I'm trying to remember now.
Well, I think the kind of
it was really beautiful watching them totally embrace everything.
Well, and the experiences of like kind of the senses, like so many things to see, so many things to smell, and for us too, like coming from, you know, because even Christ Church was very like, there's like I don't think there was even a cross. Like it was very like, you almost pride yourself on the fact that like oh, this is just a building. Like the building, you know, the church is not a building, or very like, you know, no images.
It's kind of Puritan kind of.
Yeah. And I don't know about Puritan in theology, but yeah, just very. And so coming here, being like, whoa, and especially as an artist, being like, wow, like you can embrace that in a new way. It was just really freeing, I guess.
I remember one thing Violet said now after you said that, because she, I can't remember the context, but it was so precious. She basically was like, I feel like God is there. In church, like God is there. And I was like, yeah. It was really sweet and beautiful. I'm trying to think. I think that's about it.
You want to close it?
So yeah, thanks for being our family.
Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing.
If there's any questions, you can ask now or grab us later. Thanks.